And welcome to a special edition of the Dunamis Word broadcast. I am your host, Pastor Harvey Burnett. I am coming to you this evening with this special broadcast. It's a dual broadcast, one that will be placed on YouTube and also the audio for those who don't want to endure seeing this mug. uh, the audio will be available as well on our podcast audio sites on Podbeam under the Dunamis Word. This is something that I hope that you will share with your friends and family because this is a very important subject matter and one that pertains to just about all of us just about all of us, period, in the United States, and especially those families with children within the school system, whether it's public or private school setting. A very important. Listen, our first thing is that our condolence goes out to all of those families that were affected in Parkland, Florida, with the shooting and the killing of those 17 people. I believe about 15 of them were students, and at least two were staff that were trying to save those children who were in the line or in the way of this horribly evil act that this young man perpetuated there in the school. This is not easy. We've got a lot of people that are trying to figure out what to do next, how to prevent this from happening. I'm convinced that as long as evil exists, these things will happen to some degree. I told somebody the other day, they're talking about gun laws and restrictions, and we'll talk about that in this broadcast. But I'm convinced you take away guns, people will pick up a knife. You take away a knife, they'll find a stick. You take away a stick, they'll find a rock. You take away all of that, they'll find their bare hands to do whatever they do. As long as there's evil in the hearts of men, evil will continue to show up. And this is something that we, people of faith, can place in perspective and also combat. And the way that we combat that is through the acceptance of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, who is able to take murder out of our hearts, minds, and out of our spirits. So these are things that have happened, and certainly our prayers are with these families. Having a daughter about the same age as many of those who were killed, and having a son, in the same age bracket as well, it certainly affected me profoundly. And after having worked within the schools, I've volunteered within the schools for over 17 years and also worked in the school as an employee, even in the security department of schools, of the public school system in my area for a short period of time. And so I know the difficulties and the thoughts, when we look at, what to do, have these questions of what to do within the schools. Now, a couple of things I wanted to point out. Number one, there's a debate over whether, at least in my area, over whether we should have armed security and armed guards within the schools. Our police or security department previously had armed security, and they were fully commissioned. They were actually a police force themselves in the security department, but they lost their commission due to laws that existed, and evidently somebody didn't know, and so they went on for a long time commissioned, and they were supposed to be decommissioned. Well, there was a big problem because then they took the guns away. Now they don't have as much authority as they would like. They don't have the police authority that they wanted. And so now there's a big push by different ones to bring that commission back, because the thought is that if we have guns, then we pose a threat to those who want to come into the school environment and do damage. Now that sounds good on one level, but the fact of the matter is that as we look at these cases that occur, many of these schools have armed security at these schools. In fact, this school that we're looking at, the Marjorie Douglas School, there in Florida had armed security. In fact, they're a fully commissioned police department, and so they have guns. So the thought that having a gun will automatically prevent things like this, yeah, that's a false notion, because people intent to do it, like I said, will do it. They don't care who's there or who they have to confront. If they're bent on trying to kill somebody or attempting to do that, they will. Now, on the other side of that, they say, well, maybe they could take them down. Well, unfortunately, one of the assistants, they can take them down if they have a gun. Unfortunately, one of the assistant football coaches in this particular district was a security officer too. He was an SRO. And he got killed himself trying to save the students. God bless his heart. God bless his family greatly. Being a coach myself, I really empathize there, as well as understanding his duties at work, and understanding his commitment to helping kids. So nevertheless, that really got me. But God bless him and his efforts, and he died to really help protect those children first and foremost, and above all, that is to be commended there. So anyway, my position is clear. No more guns in schools. We don't need guns. We don't need the kids to be in the middle of a gun fight out or shootout and all of that. I know it sounds counterintuitive to some of you, but I think that there's a better approach that we can take. Certainly, we don't need guns in the school to threaten the kids that are there with fear. I think it's a much better argument if you make the argument to keep the outside forces out, although we can see in this particular case and in some others that really didn't matter. So what do we do? Do we need to change gun laws in order to make these things work? It was just interesting doing some topical research. The age to drink is 21. The age to vote is 18. But so far as having long guns are concerned within the United States, I found at least two venues, Minnesota and also Massachusetts, that allows 14 and 15-year-old kids to have long guns. Most dealers in the United States, they can't sell them to underage. People are young people under 18. But these, in some venues, kids 16, 15, 14 years old can possess. So non-licensed dealers can also, depends upon the venue, transfer these guns to children as well in some venues. And you'd have to check those venues for yourself. There's a good website to go to. If I refer you to one called Gifford's Law Center website, and just look up the minimum age to purchase and possess guns, and you'll be surprised there at what the Gifford's Law Center will give you. So nevertheless, there's some ideas I think that are better ideas on how to prevent this and what to do. I'm a believer in Second Amendment rights as well. I believe in, if a person wants to possess a gun and can have one legally, they should be able to have one. Some other individuals now are looking at the mentally ill and saying that the mentally ill should be prohibited from having guns. And, these things are borderline discriminatory from the standpoint that the false assumption is that all mentally ill persons do these types of crimes or are more prone to commit a crime. I think we've got to be careful that we don't send that message, because that's just not the truth. There are some people that are mentally ill that don't do these type of things and never would do these type of crimes or commit these type of crimes. So we've got to be careful from that perspective. Second thing is that we've got to do better in identifying individuals up front in these potential problems. Now, there must be within the schools, I believe immediately, these are things that we can do, is produce better screening within schools, within the school system. Most of you are familiar with the fact you go to the doctor now under certain circumstances. They'll pull out a list. You go to the emergency room, they'll pull out a list and they'll ask you about your mental health. Have you thought about committing suicide? Have you done this? Do you feel safe at home? Do you feel safe around your spouse? Do you feel safe around your parents? All this type of stuff. We don't do those type of screening, even though school is compulsory. In other words, students have to be there. There is no general screening that happens with any of the students. They just walk up into school and go from day to day without any type of pre-screening. People don't know what they're dealing with. Some of the students don't want to be there in those environments. Some of them act out. They let you know they don't want to be there. Listen, I know I've been on the security side. I've been in the student helps, the one-on-one situation. These went down to kindergartners on up to middle school and high school age kids. And I know some of them have a problem for whatever reason. Sometimes the system has failed them and they have no trust or confidence in the system. And so they begin to act out in various situations. But there's no screening process, or very little screening process up front. We only screen when there's a problem. We take out all kinds of reference materials and manuals and we screen when there's an issue, but we need to do better up front in screening. We need to be able to evaluate the student mental condition and mental health. By doing those screenings, we can actually find out, where the focus and attention needs to be. One of the things that the Secret Service did is they did a report and a study over all the school shootings, I believe since Columbine. And what they found out was that in 80% of those shootings and those shooters, 80% of them had left messages or information, whether on social media or with family and friends, that they were going to do what they did, that they were going to go into a school and shoot. 80%. Okay? About 78% of teen shooters had indicated suicidal tendencies prior to these things happening. 78% of them had said that they were going to kill themselves, or they were going to kill somebody else, or they were going to go down in some type of blaze of glory. That's pretty consistent. So this is the perspective of mental health that I want to focus on here, and I would like others in the audience to really kind of take the petition to your local school boards with that. We need better mental screening. We need better social emotional development screening within the context of the school system, and we need a team approach from top to bottom. We've got far too many punitive or disciplinary position-minded people in our schools. In other words, when things are out of place, the first thing we want to think of is a penalty. When there's a student's not on time, we want to penalize the student immediately. Now, I'm not saying deal away with penalties. I'm not saying that. Make everything acceptable. No, that's not what we're saying. But what we are saying is that we need to sometimes look deeper. We have a student that has been historically on time. All of a sudden, they're not at school on time, and that thing goes on. We need to first intervene and find out, okay, what's the situation? What's going on? What's the preventive measure? And we put this stuff down on paper, but unfortunately, the school is the worst place to actually follow through because everybody's too busy in meetings, too busy doing things, and not enough face time with our students. So we need to take a team approach from the top down. You have a teacher has a student that's historically getting A's. You have a file that you keep on every student that comes along with the student from grade to grade. You ought to be able to assess from that file and from that student's historic performance what's going on with this student and what some of the breakdowns are. You go to school to do this. You learn this in certain universities, and it's called child psychology. You learn these type of things in the child psychology department and a course of your studies, and then when you get in the position, you don't use much of what you've learned, and that's sad because that's when it's time to use that. So we've got to do better at assessing. You got a student that's getting A's, all of a sudden they start getting F's, they start becoming lazy, they've been a good student otherwise, all of a sudden things are going on, they're not there, they're having attitude issues and problems. There's time, that means that there's an intervention that's necessary, not tomorrow, yesterday. That needs to happen right away. Somebody needs to be aware of what's going on and get in there and put both feet in and do what's necessary so in order to handle this situation. In this shooter's life, this Cruz young boy that killed those 17 people. In 2010, there were 39 calls, police calls, to this boy's residence. He lost his mother, a foster mother, I believe, in November of last year. But there were 39 calls since 2010 to his residence for police interaction, violence at home, something going on with this young man. Now, tell me that law enforcement and the school should not have interacted. They kicked him out of the school. He later came back to the school a year later, and he did this shooting. But tell me that there should not have been some triggers. Instead of just moving him off and saying, okay, well, let's send him down to the school where all the quote unquote bad kids are. Let's just get him out of our environment. There should have been a time to where, okay, now let's get in. We see these issues. Let's get in. Let's find out what's going on with this young man. Let's find out what we can do here to help this young man. Let's find out what we can do to intervene into this situation. Okay? This is working together as a team. We've got to create a team concept throughout our school. Our principals, our teachers, our security staff, even our janitorial staff must begin to work together in order to address the issues we can. This is prevention. We want to eliminate this thing in schools. This is prevention. This is how it's done. Very rarely will somebody come in from outside just off the street and just run up into the school and start shooting. Most of the time, it's going to be somebody that's had something going on, some type of relationship with the school somewhere. And listen, a lot of these kids on social media, they will tell you exactly who's going to do what and who's threatening to do what. So we've got to have a definite relationship building mentality within the schools. You know what I saw when I was in schools? And as I'm in schools from time to time now, you know what I saw? I saw a room full of kids sitting there talking to each other. And when the adults were in the room, you know where they were? They were standing around in each other's face, 3 or 4 of them at a time, just standing around talking, shooting the breeze. Oh, that sounds so nice, doesn't it? Yes, you're head honcho. You're the principal. You just talk to your colleagues and associates. But you know what you've done? You've let those students down. That's what you've done because you haven't connected with those students. I believe that there should be a policy. Another part of this, there should be a policy that there's no congregation of 3 or more adults within the presence of students within the school. And I'm talking about during relaxation or downtime of students. The adults should be in tune with the students and find out what the students need and what's going on with the students. Because it's during those times that you build relationships, it's during those times that the students come to you and trust and give you information to help you help them and also help the school environment. So know your student. Become proactive in intervention. These are things that work. There's kids, like I said, that know that there's certain of their friends that are knuckleheads that are planning to do certain things. And if there's no relationship building within the school, if all you know is penalties, if all you know is just rules and regulations, and you don't think about the human element of these children, you have let them down, you have failed them, and you have opened up your school to these type of things happening. Am I blaming the school on this young man, what he did? No, I'm not. Not blaming the school. I think by all accounts, the superintendent and staff did rather well and did the best that they can do. But in order to deal with this problem, which all of us recognize that there's a problem, we've got to do more than what we have done before. We've got to do better than what we've done before in order to solve this issue. So listen, my time is fleeting here. As I conclude this broadcast, I just want you to be aware of the fact that it's time for us as a community to solve this problem. And you can take all the guns off the street that you want. Like I said, that's not going to do it. If you pass some legislation to make yourself feel better, that's fine. I'm all for that. But the fact of the matter is is that this thing begins a lot farther than just a gun in somebody's hand or a concealed weapon. It's a lot more deep than that. We've got to be relationship builders, and we've got to get in there and make the difference in the lives of these kids. So I challenge each and every one of you today to become proactive within your local school setting, and to ask the school to screen better. When these kids begin to act out, we've got to, they've got all kinds of things around. They've got so many psychologists and all of this type of thing at school, enough to choke a horse. But what are we doing? Are we screening properly? Are we looking at those signs, and are we putting the proper interventions? And no matter what, make sure that the spiritual well-being is accounted for. Don't bring in dogs in the school over the spiritual elements, the pastors, the clerics, and different ones that these families depend upon. Don't treat dogs better than pastors. We tried to intervene one time and tried to help be there for students in the time of loss, and they let the dogs in and kicked the pastors out. Don't do that. Let the pastors be the pastors, because we know a lot of times in our churches what's going on, sometimes even before the school knows. And we know who to minister to and how to help them many times. So keep the spiritual part in the intervention plan, and you'll be a winner. All right. And further, on this particular broadcast, I say no to Dan Walther and his need and desire to have guns in the Peoria public schools. We say no to that. That was a horrible platform to run on. And if all you know, like I said, is penalty and punitive measures for kids, what is a gun going to be for? Gun going to make the students go to class? What is that? That's not how you build relationships in schools. And I'm sorry if you feel like that the children, because they're ethnic, have to have a gun trained on them in order to learn. Then you don't need to be in that position. You don't need to be a board member if that's your thoughts. And that's just the plain truth of the matter. Not just railing on Mr. Walther. There's a host of individuals that think that same way because they're afraid of the clients that they deal with every day. And that's a sad shame. Anyway, listen, you know me. This is Pastor Harvey Burnett. I don't mind being controversial. So what if I am? One thing you can't blame me for or doubt me for is for loving our children. Love them. When I was there and as I'm there now in the schools, I build relationships with the kids. That's the best way. They'll always remember that. You show up once every blue moon and you don't care about anything but your record, your reputation, and your title, they'll see that too. Come on, let's do better than that. Let's change our communities, one community at a time. And we can do that by expressing our hearts, making connection with these students, finding out what their need is, and putting our resources together to make sure we match the need. Listen, we've got to have more security. They don't need guns. They don't need a club or a pipe to hit anybody up over the head. But what we need is those connections and to build those relationships, and we can stop these things from happening. I'm just convinced of that. All right. Thank you. Got to go. Until next time, this is Pastor Harvey Burnett. All right. God bless you real good.